Hey, welcome back to another episode of Better Than I Found It, the podcast all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor University. Today I had scheduled a podcast guest, a PGA Tour player, but I had canceled. So we're going to try that interview just a little bit later on. And because of that, I have just decided to go back to my Stuff That Works journal, volume number 4, with 4 totally unrelated stories, but all stories that I thought were impactful enough for me as a coach to want to remember, and I put them down in my Stuff That Works journal. As I said, they're not necessarily related to each other, but I think all stories that have some potential use for a young coach or just anybody who loves the game. The first story is about a guy named Ted Goin. Now, most of you probably don't know who Ted Goin was. He was an Oklahoma kid, born and bred. Went and played Oklahoma State for Labor and Harris Senior back in the late 1960s, early 1970s. Ted was the best player in Oklahoma at the time, and went on to become a 3-time All-American at Oklahoma State, honorable mention, third team. So he was obviously a very good player and helped continue that tradition at Oklahoma State. When he got out, he toiled on mini tours for several years, didn't play his best, really. He played the tour at least one year that I know of, but wasn't a regular member of the tour, and at some point was working for Art Proctor at Kickingbird Golf Course as an assistant golf professional in the late 1970s. And the story that I'm going to read to you kind of has a few caveats, but I thought I'd like to read it to you. It does relate to coaching, and I think Art, who was a great teacher of the game, was also a great coach. He was my college coach. Even though he was a lay coach, he was a head golf professional at a course that we played at, but he went to tournaments with us occasionally and certainly worked with our team on a consistent basis. But he was also Ted Goin's teacher. And so Ted was, late 1970s, was going out for another stint on the mini tours. He would be headed out to Arizona. It was January. He had a couple of weeks before he was leaving. And here goes the story. Sometime in the late 1970s, former Oklahoma State All-American Ted Goin was about to embark on a series of mini-tour events in Arizona. He had been working as an assistant pro for Art Proctor at Kickingbird Golf Course in Edmond. About a week before he was to depart, he was struggling with his game, unable to find anything. And he went to Art, asking him to watch him hit some balls. At the end of the session, Art said to Ted, "Ted, your golf swing looks fine. Nothing stands out to me. Instead of getting technical as you head out to Arizona, you should play golf every day this week and start posting some low numbers before you head out to Arizona." And Art looked at Ted and said, "Ted, what's your lowest score ever in competitive events? In a competition, what is the lowest score you ever shot?" You're talking about a 3-time All-American here. And his answer to Art was, 68. 4 under par is the lowest I've ever shot in competition. And Art thought to himself, that's crazy. So Ted, who was hoping for some technical fix or something more articulate, something deep, this is what he got from Art. Art said, "Well, that's crazy. You're too good a player for that to be your lowest score. So here's what I want you to do each day. Warm up this week, each day. Warm up, then tee off in number 1. If you're not 2 under par through 4, then head back over to number 1 tee and start over." Now, you should know that number 4 green at Kickingbird at the time finished about 40 yards from number 1 tee. And so it was very close. We used to play that loop a lot when I was a high school coach and playing mini tour golf. We'd always play 1 through 4. At least you had a 4-hole loop. So Art knew that 4-hole loop would be easy for Ted to play. And Ted did it over and over and over until he got 2 under par. And when he got 2 under par, he was able to go on and play that 18 holes that day. He did it and repeated this every single day for 7 days. His first tournament round in Arizona, or his first tournament in Arizona the following week, he posted 1 round of 60 in competition, 8 shots better than he'd ever played in his career. I don't know what the scores were at Kickingbird that week leading up, but he never went past number 4 green without being 2 under par to go to number 5 tee. And so Art felt like he was just ingraining this low score mentality in Ted's head. When I later became a coach, one of the things that I did at Edmond High School, since we were coming out of the winter every year in late February, early March, our guys' games were, pretty rusty, like they would be anybody, you go through a harsh winter. We would start our first qualifying round from the ladies' tees. And if a player shot under par, then we could move back to the senior tees or the next tee box back for the next qualifying round. If nobody shot under par, we played the next one from the ladies' tees again. But we would never move back tee boxes until someone on the team shot under par that particular day. And eventually we got back to the championship tees, and then we would play a mixture of different tee boxes at that point. But wanted to get my guys to think low. Now, when I got here to Baylor, one of my players who was a two-time All-American was Cooper Dossie, who's still playing the Korn Ferry Tour. In fact, he made the cut yesterday with a 4 under par round to make the cut in Chile on the Korn Ferry Tour. He'll play on the weekend. But Cooper, I asked him a question after he'd been playing professional golf for about a year. I said, what's the most important thing you need to do out there right now? He said, well, learning to go low, literally trying to play the front tees or anything to teach yourself how to go as low as you physically can possibly go. You have to shoot 5 under or lower pretty much every day on these tours. And that was Cooper's quote to me. And bear in mind, Cooper once shot 59 at tour school, and in an APT event, he shot 58. Those 2 rounds in competition on actual tours were within 6 months of each other. Cooper knows how to go low, and he does go low occasionally, really, really low. But I encourage all young coaches or any coaches, period, that if your players are struggling, let them shoot low. There's nothing wrong with shooting low numbers. In fact, it's kind of why we play the game, to shoot the lowest we can. And going back to the late 1970s when Art Proctor, who was not a golf coach, he was pretty much just a swing teacher and a head pro, taught Ted Goen, if you're going to shoot low, you better get your mind thinking low numbers. And so Ted played that loop 4 holes every day until he got 2 under par and then went on. So anyway, good lesson on how to shoot low. My next story in Stuff That Works, completely unrelated to that one, but it goes back to my high school coaching days at Edmond Memorial. I was the assistant coach to Rick Leith. Rick Leith was a great man and a really awesome coach at Edmond Memorial. And for years, he and I worked together along with another man named Mark Tippin, who was a math teacher at Edmond High School. We were the triple trio there. We had absolutely total commitment to that golf team. Loved it. But one of the things that you must know about high school golf in Oklahoma in those days, this is 1991 when I'm talking about, you couldn't coach during the round. So you were playing your team, you could coach them before and you could coach them after, but not during the round. And I always thought that's kind of curious. It's crazy. But you could, however, walk the golf course as the team was playing. And I would always do that. I wanted to see what they're actually doing in competition, after our preparation for the event, what it looks like in competition. It's crazy to think we couldn't coach at that time, but we couldn't. But there was also a large contingent of high school coaches that enjoyed playing. And so because coaches couldn't actually coach, at invitational events all throughout the state, you would have 2 or 3 tee times before the first tournament tee time where coaches would go out and play. And I never did take advantage of that opportunity. I would love to play. I love the game, so it would have been nice to play. But I knew I was there to coach. And so I never really could understand completely why the other coaches did that. Well, they figured that I'm not going to be able to coach anyway. So what good can I do out there? I may as well play golf this day. So anyway, that was kind of the setup at the time. I didn't like it. I didn't love it for sure. It was like, cause we're here coaching. And I always thought to myself, if the administration really knew that the high school golf coach that we pay to be a coach, although not very much money in those days, but if they were just playing golf, it didn't seem like you were actually being a coach. But anyway, so that was the rules in the day. And we were playing a golf tournament in 1991 at Lawton Fort Sill Officers Club. So it was like the Army base golf course in Lawton, Oklahoma, just north of Lawton in a town called Fort Sill. And I had pulled in with the Edmond Bulldogs, and we were in the parking lot kind of getting our clubs out of the van. And I noticed a van from an opposing school just screeching through the parking lot and came to a halt really, really fast. And the coach of that team got his clubs out of the van real quick and just raced to the first tee. And I guess he'd already given instructions to his players that, just make sure you make your tee time. I'm going to play. And it was kind of a funny looking scene because he literally burned rubber getting to that parking place and literally ran to the first tee. It was a 36-hole day, so he was going to try to play at least 18, but probably 36. So I was getting my team ready, and we actually were paired with that team that day. And I noticed probably an hour later as our number 3 man was getting ready to tee off, there were 2 kids kind of lost over there. And before you knew it, it was very aware that 2 kids had not made it to their tee times. So these kids had missed their tee time and were disqualified. And their coach was out playing golf. And I was looking at these kids. They were pretty upset. They were freshmen. They'd never played in a golf tournament in high school, didn't know what to do, kind of got lost. The driving range was not nearby. The clubhouse was a little ways away, so they'd gotten over there. Before you knew it, they'd gotten to the first tee and they'd missed their tee time. Both of them were disqualified. So their team couldn't post a score that day. And at least in the first round, they were able to play in the second second round that afternoon. But their team did not have a team score for the 36-hole event that day. So fast forward 2 months later when we were hosting the state championship at Oak Tree Country Club East. And the head pro and director of golf at the time he had told the Coaches Association that of the 12 teams there, if you had 12 coaches, they were welcome to go across the street to Oak Tree National. I think it was called Oak Tree Golf Club at the time, and play 18 holes, on the 36-hole day. Well, this same coach who had left his 2 freshmen stranded at Fort Sill wanted to really take advantage of this. So he got on a cart and he played the first 18 holes with those other coaches, and he got in and he played another 18, and then he played another 18. He literally zipped around the golf course. It was a Monday. There were literally almost no golfers on the course, played all day long. When I found out about that later, I thought to myself, that's crazy. Why in the world? I mean, he literally took advantage of that situation. But also, he literally abandoned his players for the full 36 holes that day of the first 2 rounds of the state championship. And I just said it in my heart that that's not going to happen ever again. Not at regionals or state. It'll never happen again. So luckily that summer at our coaches convention, we got the groundswell kind of came about. Not everybody was in favor of it because a lot of coaches love playing. So at invitational events, coaches were still allowed to play, before the round or at some point on the golf course that day, but never at regionals and state again. I always thought to myself, I realized at the time we weren't able to coach, but you at least should be out there supporting your players. And 2 years later, the rules were changed, and ever since, so it's been over 30 years, high school coaches have been able to walk the golf course with their players and actually coach. So that was an unusual story, but I think a great outcome for high school golf in Oklahoma. I certainly liked it, and even though I know I was not the most popular coach in the world for driving that forward, I think the change was very positive for players and actually for coaches as well. Third story from Stuff That Works today was called The Value of One Shot. As we as coaches are constantly trying to get kids to understand the value of one shot. Because if you look at every single tournament, not every single tournament, most tournaments, the difference in the championship might be one shot. There might be, you played 3 rounds, 5 players on 15 different teams, and the number 1 and 2 teams are separated by 1 stroke after all of that time. So when you try to teach the kids the importance of a value of shots, well, I mean, obviously in tour events the same way. How could I save a shot? What would be the value of a shot? And so that's a lesson that we're constantly trying to teach the guys, whether it's short game turning 3 shots into 2, or if it's the way you handle adversity. If you handle it well, you save a shot. If you don't, you lose a shot. Whatever it is, it's just really, really important for high school coaches, college coaches, to get 5 players to understand the value of one shot. So this story I wrote is about one of the most glaring examples of that I've ever witnessed as a coach. It was in the spring of 2014 at Auburn's golf course at the regional. So I was the assistant coach to Jay Sewell at Alabama. We had a really, really good team that year. And obviously the regional, it's no guarantee for anyone, but, we had a good team. We thought we would advance through to the national championship. And during the second round, we were paired with the University of Texas. And I was walking in the group with Trey Mullinex, who was playing with Gavin Hall of Texas. Gavin was a kid I'd recruited when I was at Oklahoma State and really wanted to have him on the team. He was a freshman on the team at Texas that year, and I'd walked with him at a couple tournaments earlier in the fall, and so this was great to get to walk with him. I really loved Gavin, awesome kid. In fact, he was a podcast guest of mine a couple of years ago on this podcast. But late in the round, there's a par 5 that has a lot of room left. It's reachable, but it has a dense forest on the right. I mean, this is very dense. These trees are very close to each other, and you can get in there. You maybe find your golf ball, but you really don't have much of a challenge or a chance to recover and do anything. It's hard to get back to the fairway from this dense forest. And Gavin had hooked his tee shot over into those trees, and my thought was he should probably just abandon the ball and just go play his provisional. But we got in there, he found his ball, and he was very, very thoughtful in this. It's not like he rushed through this. It's not like he was being angry. It's not like he was not caring or being careless. He was not at all doing that. Found his ball, thought he could advance it back to the fairway, and hit his second shot, which stayed in the trees, so he's lying 2. Hit his third shot, he's still in the trees. Fourth shot, still in the trees. And there's just at this point I'm going, oh my goodness, I don't know how Gavin's going to excavate this. How's he going to do this? He hit his 5th shot and barely got it to a spot where he could get the 6th shot to the fairway. So he punches that 6th shot. He's laying 6, middle of the fairway. It's the second round of the regional. It's sort of an imploding moment. I mean, there's no question. And in most kids' minds, you would think, and this is what you try to train as a coach for kids not to do, but he's probably thinking, well, I'm out of it. My score's not counting today. And if there's ever a lesson to be learned for every single player, your score always counts. It doesn't matter what you think. Your score matters, and it counts. But anyway, he's out of the fairway. He's taking his time, going through, he's getting his yardage. He's got a 2-iron. He's about into a breeze. It's cool. He's got a 2-iron from about 225 yards. Beautiful, beautiful 2-iron. Towering 2-iron. I mean, Gavin has a lot of club head speed. He can hit that shot pretty well, I think. Landed on the green and rolled right into the hole for a double bogey. So it was kind of an unusual double bogey. And when you hold out from 225 yards with a 2-iron, and we all high-fived him. We walked down there, but in his mind, he saved at least a couple of shots right there by holding that out. And when we got to the 18th hole and went to the scoring tent, he realized that one of his teammates at Texas had shot 79 that day. Gavin, because of that hole out with the 2-iron, had gotten in with a 78, even with that double bogey. And the next day, the University of Texas total was 884. They were 5th at regionals and got the last qualifying spot to go to nationals. The University of New Mexico was 1 shot back at 885. And 2 things occur to me on this. One, teaching a young man that you're constantly thinking your score matters. It does count. And number 2, you never know when 1 shot is going to matter. And in that case, he probably saved 2 or 3 shots from 225 by holding it. But regardless, if it hadn't gone in the hole, he would have still saved something because he would have hit a great shot right up there next to the hole and made the putt. But I'll never forget that. At the moment when he held it out, I didn't think about it being that significant. When his score counted that day, you thought, well, it mattered. And then the next day when they made it by 1 shot and were able to qualify and go to nationals at Prairie Dunes the following week, it was like that was pretty intense, pretty meaningful and impactful for their program. So the final story is a story I've told in various ways, but not the complete story. And it's one of my favorite stories in college golf history because I was involved, Mike Holder was involved, Charles Howell III was involved, and a rules official I had never met before and have never seen since was also involved. But anyway, that week in 2000, Oklahoma State had a very, very good team. Charles Howell, Edward Lohr, Landry Mahan, Anders Holtman, and J.C. De Leon was the freshman on that team. We would go on to win the national championship that week in a playoff over Georgia Tech, the second playoff in the history of the NCAA. And Charles Howell's dominance that week could not be overstated. He bogeyed the first two holes of the championship, shot 69 that day, and went on to literally dominate the tournament. He shot a total of 23 under par that week. He won by 8 strokes, and he beat Phil Mickelson's 72-hole record by 6 strokes. So it was a completely dominant performance. Understated that week was Landry Mahan's 13th place finish. Landry was able to, I don't think people ever looked at that. They always looked at Charles Howell's great scores that brought us a championship, and that's true. But Landry he had his best NCAA title. I think he finished 13th, had a great week. Edward Lohr kicked in some scores, and JC ended up making a birdie putt in the playoff. He didn't play well in the event himself, but he definitely impacted that playoff by making. But that's not really the story. And it was Mike Holder's 8th national championship. He was runner-up 10 times. So he had an amazing career that has been documented, very well documented over and over and over. But what happened that week that I thought was so interesting was we had a rules official that I had never seen before. And it was a lady. The head rules official, Clyde Luther, was ill that week, and so I think they got a late replacement for Clyde. Anyway, I'm going to tell the story without telling her name, mainly because I don't think I really know her name. But she had 3 major confrontations with Mike Holder that week that I thought were interesting. And he, anyway. So we were obviously one of the best teams in the country at the time, and pretty noticeable. Charles would go on to win the national championship that week. Was one of the best players, if not the best player. He won the Fred Haskins Award that year, the Ben Hogan Award, and I think the Jack Nicklaus Award. Just had an incredible year. But one situation I've never documented before was 3 interactions that Mike Holder had with a female rules official. Now I'll read straight from the Stuff That Works journal. A lady, it seems, that had never been seen before or since she was the head rules official because longtime USGA man Clyde Luther was ill. Early in the week, she confronted Mike Holder and told him that the Nike swoosh on Charles Howell's socks was too large. Mike looked at her and said, "Ma'am, are you kidding? What do you suggest he do?" She told Mike to have Charles roll them down so the swoosh wouldn't be visible. Begrudgingly, Mike and Charles complied. At another point during the week, the same female official approached Mike and declared, "Coach, that coach's armband is to be worn on your bicep, not on your belt loop." Mike had looped it around his belt loop because it was too large for his bicep and had kept slipping off. The word coach was still easily visible even though it was looped through his belt. And even if you go to Karsten Creek today in the trophy hallway, you see a large picture of Mike standing next to Charles at that national championship with the belt loop containing that coach's badge. Mike couldn't believe his ears. Was this woman serious? Did she have a hidden agenda or perhaps some vendetta with Mike? Mike heard what she said, gave her a blank stare, and walked on. So this is the second confrontation he had with her. And I'm thinking, and again, in these days you could only have one coach at a time. So I'm watching pretty much all the players. But I've seen one of those 2 confrontations, and that's the one I saw. And I thought, why in the world is she so worried about this armband? But anyway, so yeah, fast forward to the 10-man playoff for the team title. That same female rules official was orchestrating things on the tee. She said, "We will go in two fivesomes. The first group will have 3 players from one team and 2 players from the other team. And the second fivesome will do the same." She looked straight at Mike Holder and said, "OSU, call it heads or tails." Mike called heads, and the coin came up heads. She then said, "Heads it is. So the first group will have 3 Georgia Tech players and 2 from Oklahoma State." Mike retorted, "But wait, I won the coin toss. I should have that option to decide if I have 3 in the first group or 2. That's my option. I won the coin toss." She said, "Sir, the rule says," Mike interrupted her immediately and said, "Ma'am, I wrote that rule, and OSU will have 3 players in the first group. End of discussion." Interestingly enough, no one ever heard from that lady again. But I remember thinking to myself, I don't know if I would confront him again, and she did not. Oklahoma State was fortunate enough to win the playoff that day, and we took home the national championship trophy. But I'll never forget that lady, who I've never seen since, and how she tried to dominate Mike Holder with rules all week long. And Mike finally took care of it in the playoff. "Ma'am, I wrote that rule, and we're going to have 3 in the first group." End of discussion. So anyway, those are just some interesting kind of hodgepodge stories, if you will. Didn't relate to each other, but my Stuff That Works journal, I've talked about it often on this podcast, is a list of stories, a group of quotes, situations, practice sessions, anything related to golf coaching or anything related to leadership, mentorship, coaching, anything along those lines, and stories I want to remember. And I thumb through these all the time, just kind of coming up with inspiration of things to say to players, things to say to my assistant coaches. And by the way, these are flooded with wisdom from my assistant coaches. I think you're a really, really good head coach. You will hire assistant coaches that add to your repertoire, that add to your Stuff That Works journal, that add to your team's success. And Jeremy Alcorn and Ryan Murphy, who currently are my assistant coaches, do that on a daily basis. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Next couple of weeks, we will have some more players and coaches on the pod, so I hope you'll join in and also follow our results as we play in the General Hackler out in South Carolina this next week. Thank you again. Have a great day.